Welcome back to my workshop journey. We'll carry on with the router table fence, and this is where we've got to so far. This is the base, and this is the dust extraction setup. So we've got the back, sides, top, everything will fit relatively flush. And so what we're going to do this afternoon is make provision for putting the base into, setting it into the actual fence. So that will mean quite a hefty router cut. So we're talking about, let me get my gauge just to make sure. Yeah, we're talking about 16.5mm wide, but because we've got the whole fence which is 32mm, I'm going to be insetting the whole thing by about 20 to 25mm. That way it will be very solid and I'll be able to screw and glue very easily into that without any of the wood splitting at all. So the first thing I've got to do is decide what router bit I'm going to be using. Now I've got several, and it's a case of being able to work out which one is best. Now I have got this rabbiting cutter, but I can't remember what the distance is between the guide bush and the edge of the cutter. So let me just do that while we're talking. And that is 14.5. It's not quite big enough. Just check. No, that's a couple of millimeters too small. I've got a bigger cutter here. Let me just check what that distance is. Now that, as it's set, is 21mm. I could use that one because, as you notice, if I put that a little closer to the lens, that is a hefty piece of metal. So I could use that. I'm not quite sure whether I have a guide bush that will adjust to 16mm. I'm going to have a look at that. But one thing I could do, I have a 17mm cutter. Let me just pull that one out. Now this is one that I've only just acquired, and I've only just put it in the box. Oh, there we go. Sorry, that's 18mm, but that will do. What I can do is use that with the router machine with the fence, and that will get me the 16mm cut, and then I'll just make several passes. Going down 20 to 25mm, I'm not going to do that in one pass anyway. It will always be Right, I've made my choice. we're going to see how this goes. I'm not going to do it on the actual workpiece first. I'm just going to use a test piece to try the concept. I've chosen the cutter, and this is the closest guide bush that I've got that will get me to the 16mm. So as I say, I'm just going to see how it goes, and then we'll take it from there. I can always revert to an ordinary straight cutter and use the guide that fits onto the router itself. And it's at this point that I realise now, in editing this video, that the microphone has died for this segment. So I'm commenting on the dust, I'm commenting on how ineffective the vacuum system was at this point where it's attached, but you can see from the picture that the single pass cutter has worked. It's the correct size, and I will be then going on to use that cutter on the baseboard itself. I'm not very dexterous with moving things around, you'll notice, but the baseboard is fitting nicely. So if you'll excuse the sound quality from now on, I do actually go on to use the camera microphone later on in the session, so we should get back to some sort of normality. And one thing you'll notice, a slight difference in sound quality, because the battery on my radio mic has just gone. So at the moment I'm working on the microphone in camera, and so as I say, you might notice a little bit of a difference. I've switched to manual focus so that you're not getting that constant clicking with the focus peaking. So workpiece is firmly attached. I've attached it to a different part of the vacuum system. Let's make the cut. And you'll notice the change in vacuum didn't seem to work. So again, this is something I'm going to have to look at. I'm not quite sure why we've got no pull there whatsoever, but I will have a look at that later when I can see you. The dust is everywhere at the moment. So that's the cut. That went very nicely. there was just a little bit of scorching at this bottom end because I was taking more of my time over it, but overall I'm very pleased with that result. And if we get the base, that fits nicely. It is actually just the right size for that, and it's down to about 22 millimeters. So again, I've got plenty of depth there. All I've got to do now is make sure that all of the components here fit nicely and there's a good seal. So that's what I'm going to do now. Right, just a rough dry fitting, and it looks like these two braces do need to go down slightly in size, so I'll give those another pass on the planer. But the top of the dust extraction unit, I think that also will need a small pass on the planer, because that fits very nicely in place, but that doesn't. There isn't much in it. You'll see that doesn't quite fit. So I might use the small 3mm router cutter just to take off that little bit there, because that is where the problem lies. Everything else fits nicely, but not that little bit, so there isn't much to take off there, but it'll be easier to do that on the 3mm router bit, because then it will be very, very neat and tidy. And I will use the router fence for that will fit onto the machine. That way everything will stay straight and even. In fact, what I might do is do that with these two braces as well. Just ease the slots just slightly so that they do fit in that little bit better. But all in all, I'm very pleased with how things have gone so far. And right, let me put that new cutter in. I've opted for a 6mm cutter, and I've attached the fence for the router. It's running against this edge here, and it's only going to be the width of this that I'm cutting, but it's just to take a little skim out, and that should ease the backboard quite considerably. Put my ears on and let's make the cut. Now that vacuum setup works nicely, so at least there wasn't any dust flying all over the place then. Now that's eased it just nicely. That will fit in very nicely, and that arrangement will work. Okay, all I'm going to do now is just make sure that that slot and that slot, they could all do with easing slightly. Just a touch. That one's okay. That one's alright. How about this one? So it's just this one that needs a touch outside it as well. Okay, so let's move the piece up. And we're going to be working roughly there. So adjust the cutter slightly. There we go. That's that one. There's that one. Vacuum ears. Noticed the deliberate mistake. I forgot to make sure everything was running smoothly, but that's fine. Okay, let's take the fence off. Move the gutter and everything there should fit nicely. Oops, no, that bit goes there. There we go, that's it. We'll go there. That bit will go there. So that slot there isn't quite big enough, but those fit nicely. That's fine. So that slot here needs adjusting a little bit, and the length of the brace needs a little bit of taking off, but right, we are getting there. Now I thought I'd just show you how things are progressing. The whole idea of this was so that the fence would be exactly perpendicular to the table. That is a very nice vertical face all across the table, and that's the arrangement at the back. As I mentioned, this slot is going to need a slight adjustment. The size of the braces here and here will need to change slightly as well, but everything's coming together nicely. I'm not going to go any further today, but we're making good progress, and a couple of weeks and this should be done. What we've got to do now, as I say, the slots need a little bit of adjustment. The holes on the front and on the base need to be put in. I need to make provision for the dust extraction pipe, and that I think will be going here, and then drill the 2 holes for fixing to these T-tracks. One thing I will be doing as well is fitting the new piece of, well, moving this piece of T-track to here, putting a new piece of T-track here, and then I'm going to be putting the T-track along the edge of the fence as well. I did want to put one of these 8mm tracks up here so that I can attach stops for deciding or making sure work pieces don't go too far. So 2 weeks, no, let's make it 4 weeks, and we should be just about finished. But thanks for watching this afternoon, and join me on the next edition.